There is a unique kind of pain that does not come from enemies, but from those who know your history, your fears, your softness, and still choose to ignore your dignity. It is the pain of being told you are loved while being treated as if your voice does not matter. You begin to question yourself, not because you are weak, but because the disrespect is delivered with familiar faces and comforting words. And that is the most confusing wound of all, when harm arrives wearing the language of care and silence is expected as proof of loyalty, when love is used as a shield for control. There is a moment in many lives when confusion quietly replaces clarity, when affection begins to feel heavy instead of safe. It happens slowly, no loud arguments, no dramatic break, just a growing sense that every decision you make is questioned. Every boundary you try to place is challenged, and every discomfort you express is answered with the same sentence. We only want what's best for you. This is where love is no longer offered as support, but used as a shield, protecting control from accountability. And because it comes from family, you are expected to accept it without hesitation, without resistance, and without naming the pain it causes. Control disguised as love rarely looks cruel on the surface. It sounds reasonable. It sounds caring. It often comes with stories of sacrifice, reminders of everything that has been done for you, and subtle warnings about disappointment. You are not shouted at. You are guided. You are not ordered. You are advised. And yet the result is the same. You slowly lose ownership of your choices. When love is genuine, it empowers. When love is used for control, it limits. It teaches you to doubt your instincts and trust permission instead. What makes this dynamic so powerful is emotional loyalty. Family knows your weak spots. They know how much you want to belong, how deeply you fear being misunderstood, how painful it would be to be labeled ungrateful. So control is wrapped in emotional language. After all we've done, this is how our family works. You're changing. These phrases are not arguments. They are emotional levers. They pull on your conscience until you begin to associate independence with guilt. And once guilt enters the room, control no longer needs force. It governs quietly. Over time, you may notice that love is offered conditionally. Approval arrives when you agree, when you comply, when you stay within the role assigned to you. The moment you step outside that role by choosing differently, thinking differently, or simply asking for space, the warmth cools. Silence replaces conversation. Disappointment replaces understanding. This is not discipline or guidance. It is emotional regulation through withdrawal, and it teaches a dangerous lesson, that love must be earned through obedience. Many people trapped in this pattern blame themselves. They wonder if they are too sensitive, too difficult, too demanding. But the problem is not sensitivity, it is awareness waking up. Healthy love does not require you to shrink to survive it. It does not punish growth. It does not feel threatened by your confidence. When control hides behind love, it resists change because change threatens authority. Your evolution becomes inconvenient to those who are comfortable directing your life. One of the most painful aspects of this experience is the inner conflict it creates. You love your family, you understand their fears, their traditions, their intentions, and yet something inside you knows that being constantly managed, corrected, or overridden is slowly draining you. This conflict can paralyze you. You stay quiet, not because you agree, but because you do not want to be the cause of tension. But silence has a cost. The longer you remain quiet, the louder the resentment grows inside you. And resentment does not disappear. It turns inward, becoming self-doubt and emotional exhaustion. It is important to understand this clearly. Control does not become acceptable simply because it comes from people who love you. Love does not grant ownership over another person's life. Guidance respects autonomy. Control replaces it. When family decisions are presented as final, when disagreement is framed as disrespect, when your no is treated as rebellion, the relationship has shifted from connection to command. And no relationship thrives under command. Recognizing this does not mean you hate your family. It means you are honest about the impact of their behavior. Love can coexist with harm, and acknowledging harm does not erase love. It challenges it to grow. The most mature relationships are not built on fear of disapproval, but on mutual respect. If love collapses the moment you assert yourself, then what you were receiving was not unconditional care, but conditional acceptance. Breaking free from control disguised as love does not always require confrontation. Sometimes it begins internally, with a quiet decision to trust your own judgment again, to stop explaining every choice, to stop seeking approval for things that do not require permission, to understand that disagreement is not betrayal and independence is not abandonment. These realizations may feel uncomfortable at first, but discomfort is often the sign that you are stepping out of a role that no longer fits. True love does not need to justify itself through pressure. It does not keep score. It does not remind you of your debt. It stands beside you even when you choose a different path. When you learn to distinguish between love that supports and love that controls, you reclaim something essential, your sense of self. And once that returns, you begin to see clearly. You were never asking for too much. You were asking for love that does not need control to exist. Respect is not optional, even in blood relations. There is a deeply rooted belief that family relationships come with automatic permission, permission to speak without listening, to decide without asking, and to dismiss feelings without consequence. Many people grow up believing that respect is something owed upward, never shared equally. They are taught that endurance is loyalty and silence is maturity. But over time, this belief creates a quiet imbalance. When respect is absent, love becomes one-sided and connection turns into obligation. Blood may connect people, but respect is what keeps that connection healthy. Disrespect within families rarely announces itself openly. It appears in interruptions, in jokes that sting, in opinions that are brushed aside, and in decisions made on your behalf without your consent. It shows up when your emotions are labeled as overreactions and your concerns are treated as inconveniences. None of this looks dramatic enough to justify protest, and that is why it continues. When disrespect is subtle, it is easier to excuse, easier to normalize, and much harder to confront. Yet its impact is profound. It teaches you that your inner world does not deserve careful attention. What makes this particularly painful is the expectation that family should be a place of safety. When respect is missing, that safety erodes. You may find yourself rehearsing conversations before speaking, measuring every word, anticipating dismissal. This constant self-monitoring is not peace, it is survival. Respect allows you to be present without fear of being diminished. Without it, even love feels unstable because you never know when your value will be questioned. Many people confuse respect with agreement. They believe that honoring someone means thinking the same way, choosing the same path, or following the same rules. But respect does not require sameness. It requires recognition. It means acknowledging that another person's thoughts, feelings, and choices matter, even when they differ from your own. In families where respect is conditional, individuality is tolerated only within strict limits. Step beyond those limits and the tone changes. Support becomes criticism, guidance becomes pressure, love becomes a reminder of how much you owe. This dynamic often leads to emotional minimization. When you express discomfort, you are told others have it worse. When you ask for understanding, you are reminded of sacrifices made for you. While gratitude is important, it should not be used to silence pain. Respect listens before it defends. It seeks to understand rather than overpower. When respect is absent, conversations become one-directional, and your role becomes passive rather than participatory. Over time, living without respect reshapes how you see yourself. You may begin to doubt your perceptions, apologize for having needs, or hesitate to assert boundaries. This is not weakness, it is conditioning. Humans adapt to environments to survive. If your voice is consistently ignored, your mind learns to quiet itself. But a quiet voice does not mean a healed heart. It means a heart that has learned it is safer to hide. It is important to understand that demanding respect is not an act of hostility. It is an act of self-acknowledgement. Respect is not about power, it is about equality. Even within family hierarchies, respect must flow both ways. Age, role, or sacrifice do not justify disregard. When respect is mutual, advice feels supportive instead of controlling, boundaries feel reasonable instead of threatening, conversations feel like exchanges, not verdicts. Establishing respect may disrupt familiar patterns. Those who benefited from your silence may resist your voice. They may accuse you of changing, becoming distant, or forgetting your roots. But growth often looks like disobedience to those who are uncomfortable with change. Choosing self-respect does not mean rejecting your family. It means redefining how you participate within it. You are allowed to evolve without asking permission. Respect does not demand perfection. It allows mistakes without humiliation. It allows disagreement without punishment. It allows space without emotional withdrawal. When respect is present, love becomes steady rather than fragile. Without it, love is constantly tested, and you are always the one expected to prove your loyalty through endurance. Ultimately, respect is the foundation that turns family into refuge rather than pressure. It reminds everyone involved that love is not proven through control or sacrifice alone, but through consideration. When you recognize that respect is not optional, even in blood relations, you take a powerful step toward emotional balance. You stop accepting closeness that costs you your dignity, and in doing so, you give yourself permission to experience family not as a burden to carry, but as a space where your presence is valued, not merely tolerated. Guilt is often disguised as concern. There is a subtle emotional strategy that operates quietly in many families, one that rarely raises its voice yet carries immense power. It begins with concern, or at least what is presented as concern. Questions sound caring, advice sounds protective, and reminders sound thoughtful. But beneath this surface, something heavier is being passed to you: guilt. Not the healthy kind that guides moral reflection, but the kind that pressures you to abandon your needs in order to keep others comfortable. When concern repeatedly leaves you feeling anxious, indebted, or ashamed for wanting independence, it is no longer concern. It is control wearing a gentle face. This form of guilt is effective because it appeals to your sense of responsibility. You are made to feel that your choices have emotional consequences beyond their natural impact. If you choose differently, someone is hurt. If you take space, someone feels abandoned. If you prioritize yourself, someone feels disrespected. Over time, your decision-making process becomes less about what is right for you and more about managing emotional reactions around you. You begin to live carefully, not freely. Guilt teaches you to carry feelings that are not yours to hold. What makes this dynamic especially powerful is that it is rarely direct. No one says you should feel guilty. Instead, it appears through sighs, disappointment, subtle remarks, and comparisons. You are reminded of how things used to be, how close you were, how much easier you were to guide. Concern becomes a narrative where your growth is framed as distance and your boundaries are framed as rejection. Slowly, the message sinks in. Being yourself costs others something, and you are responsible for that cost. This emotional burden often leads to self-censorship. You hesitate before speaking honestly. You soften your needs. You delay your plans. You may even abandon goals that bring you joy simply to avoid the weight of disappointment directed at you. The tragedy is that this sacrifice is rarely acknowledged. It is expected. Guilt thrives in environments where compliance is praised and independence is questioned. The more you give, the more is quietly demanded. Many people confuse this guilt with love. They believe that feeling responsible for others' emotions is proof of care. But love does not require self-erasure. Healthy concern respects boundaries. It offers guidance without obligation and support without pressure. When guilt replaces trust, love becomes conditional. Approval arrives when you align, and emotional distance appears when you do not. This pattern teaches you that harmony is achieved not through mutual understanding, but through your restraint. Living under constant guilt affects more than your choices. It shapes your identity. You may start to see yourself as difficult, selfish, or ungrateful for wanting normal things: peace, autonomy, clarity. You question whether your feelings are valid or excessive. This internal conflict creates emotional fatigue. You are always negotiating. between who you are and who you are expected to be. Over time, this negotiation drains your energy and dulls your sense of purpose. It is important to recognize that other people's disappointment is not automatically your responsibility. Adults are responsible for managing their own emotions. Concern becomes unhealthy when it demands emotional repayment. When your freedom is framed as a loss to others, something essential is being distorted. Growth naturally changes dynamics, and change is not harm. Guilt convinces you that staying the same is kindness, but staying the same when you are growing is stagnation, not loyalty. Breaking free from guilt disguised as concern does not mean becoming cold or uncaring. It means restoring balance. It means understanding that empathy does not require obedience. You can listen without complying. You can love without surrendering your direction. This shift may feel uncomfortable at first because guilt is familiar. It has guided you for so long that its absence feels like danger. But what you are actually feeling is freedom, learning to breathe. When you begin to set emotional boundaries, some people may intensify their concern. They may worry more, question more, or remind you more often of potential consequences. This is not always intentional harm. It is fear. Fear of losing influence, fear of change, fear of being left behind. Understanding this can help you respond with calm instead of defensiveness. You do not need to argue with guilt. You need to outgrow it. True concern supports your strength. It trusts your ability to decide. It celebrates your independence rather than mourning it. When you learn to separate guilt from care, you reclaim your emotional authority. You stop living to manage reactions and start living with intention. And in that clarity, you realize something profound. Love that requires guilt to survive was never asking you to grow. It was asking you to stay small. Silence is not patience, it is self-erasure. There is a point where silence stops being calm and starts becoming costly. At first, it feels like wisdom. You tell yourself that staying quiet avoids conflict, that patience keeps relationships intact, that enduring discomfort is a sign of maturity. You learn to swallow words mid-sentence, to nod even when something feels wrong, to let moments pass because speaking feels heavier than staying still. But silence has a way of changing its meaning over time. What begins as restraint slowly becomes disappearance. You are still present, yet pieces of you are quietly fading. In families where voices are ranked rather than respected, silence is often praised. You are called understanding, well-behaved, or sensible for not reacting. Your ability to absorb discomfort is mistaken for strength, but patience is meant to protect peace, not erase identity. When you are consistently quiet to keep others comfortable, the peace you maintain is not shared, it is borrowed at your expense. Silence becomes a role you are expected to perform, not a choice you freely make. The danger of prolonged silence is that it teaches you to distrust your own reactions. When something hurts and you say nothing, your mind begins to question whether the hurt was real. When boundaries are crossed and you stay quiet, your body learns that discomfort must be endured rather than addressed. Over time, this creates emotional confusion. You feel restless, irritated, or drained without fully understanding why. The truth is simple but painful. Unspoken feelings do not disappear, they settle inside you. Consider how often silence is mistaken for agreement. When you do not speak, others assume acceptance. Decisions are made, narratives are formed, expectations are set, all without your input. Not because you agree, but because you are quiet. This is how self-erasure begins. Your preferences become invisible, your needs become optional, your presence becomes symbolic rather than participatory. You are there, but you are not included in shaping what affects you. Many people stay silent out of fear, fear of being misunderstood, fear of being labeled difficult, fear of causing emotional distance. In families, this fear is intensified by history and obligation. You remember moments of closeness. You remember support. You do not want to disrupt what still works, so you choose quiet compromise over honest tension. But unresolved tension does not vanish. It hardens. It turns into resentment, emotional numbness, or sudden exhaustion. Silence does not protect relationships indefinitely. It slowly weakens them from within. There is also a subtle identity shift that happens when silence becomes habitual. You begin to define yourself by adaptability rather than authenticity. You pride yourself on being easy, low maintenance, unproblematic, but beneath that image is a growing distance from your true self. You stop asking what you want and focus only on what is expected. This is not selflessness. It is survival learned too well. And survival, when prolonged, costs joy. It is important to understand that speaking up is not the opposite of patience. Silence and patience are not the same. Patience allows room for growth. Silence removes your presence from the process. You can be patient while still being clear. You can be calm while still being honest. When patience is genuine, it does not demand that you disappear. It allows dialogue, adjustment, and mutual effort. Silence, on the other hand, asks only one person to carry the weight. Breaking the habit of silence can feel uncomfortable, even frightening. The first time you speak honestly, your voice may shake, your words may come out imperfect, you may feel guilt for disrupting the familiar order, but discomfort is often the sound of your identity returning. When you begin to express yourself, you are not creating conflict, you are revealing reality. And reality, even when inconvenient, is healthier than harmony built on suppression. Not everyone will welcome your voice. Some may accuse you of changing, others may minimize your words or respond defensively. This does not mean you are wrong, it means the dynamic is shifting. People who benefited from your silence may struggle to adjust to your presence. That resistance is not proof that you should return to quiet. It is proof that your silence was carrying more than its share. Learning to speak does not require aggression. It requires clarity. It means choosing moments where honesty matters more than comfort. It means stating your feelings without apology and setting boundaries without justification. Your voice does not need to be loud to be firm. Even a calm sentence can redraw emotional boundaries when it comes from self-respect rather than fear. Ultimately, silence should be a place you visit, not a home you live in. You deserve relationships where your thoughts are heard, your emotions are considered, and your presence is felt. When you stop confusing silence with patience, you reclaim something vital, your right to exist fully within the spaces you occupy. And once you allow yourself to be seen and heard, you realize that peace does not come from disappearing, it comes from being real. Healing begins when you redefine love. There comes a quiet turning point in life when endurance stops feeling noble and starts feeling heavy. It is the moment you realize that surviving emotional strain is not the same as living well. For a long time, love may have been defined for you by sacrifice, silence, and loyalty at any cost. You were taught that staying, tolerating, and understanding endlessly were signs of a good heart. But healing begins when you question these definitions. When you ask yourself whether love is meant to exhaust you or strengthen you, this question alone opens a door many are afraid to touch. Redefining love does not happen suddenly. It unfolds slowly, often after disappointment, confusion, or emotional fatigue. You begin to notice patterns. Love that requires you to suppress your feelings. Love that withdraws warmth when you assert yourself. Love that demands explanation for boundaries but offers none for hurt. These realizations can be painful because they challenge familiar beliefs, yet they are necessary. You cannot heal inside definitions that harmed you. Growth requires new language for connection. For many people, love was modeled as obligation. You were shown that love means availability at all times, agreement even when it hurts, and forgiveness without accountability. While compassion is valuable, love without limits becomes self-neglect. Healing begins when you understand that love is not proven by how much you endure, but by how safely you can exist within it. Safe love allows mistakes without punishment and differences without emotional withdrawal. It does not fear your strength or independence. Redefining love also means separating love from fear. Fear of disappointing others, fear of being misunderstood, fear of losing connection. When fear drives your relationships, you stay small to stay accepted. But love that depends on fear is fragile. It survives only as long as you remain manageable. True love does not shrink when you grow. It adapts. It adjusts. It learns to meet you where you are becoming, not where you used to be. This process often brings guilt. When you change how you love, others may feel uncomfortable. They may say you are distant, changed, or no longer the same. What they often mean is that you are no longer predictable. Healing disrupts familiar dynamics. When you stop overgiving, those who relied on your constant availability may feel the loss. This discomfort does not mean you are wrong. It means the relationship is being asked to evolve. Redefining love includes redefining your role within relationships. You stop being the one who fixes everything, absorbs everything, and understands everything. You allow others to carry their share. You learn that mutual effort is not selfish, it is necessary. Love is not one person bending endlessly while others remain still. It is movement on both sides. When love becomes mutual, it becomes sustainable. Healing also requires compassion for yourself. You may grieve the love you hoped for. You may mourn the belief that patience alone could change others. This grief is valid. Letting go of old definitions can feel like loss, even when it leads to freedom. But what you are truly releasing is not love, it is illusion. And in that release, space is created for something healthier to enter. As you redefine love, you may find yourself setting boundaries that once felt impossible, saying no without explanation, taking space without guilt, choosing peace without apology. These are not acts of rejection, they are acts of alignment. You are aligning your relationships with your values rather than your fears. Boundaries do not weaken love, they clarify it. They reveal which connections can grow and which were sustained only by your silence. Healing does not mean cutting everyone off. It means choosing how close people get. It means understanding that love can exist alongside distance and connection can remain without constant access. You are allowed to love others without allowing them to harm you emotionally. This balance is not cruelty, it is wisdom earned through experience. When you redefine love, you stop chasing approval and start cultivating respect. You stop proving your worth and start protecting it. You realize that love should feel steady, not anxious, supportive, not draining, warm, not conditional. And perhaps the most important realization of all emerges quietly. You were never difficult to love. You were simply trying to grow in spaces that demanded you stay the same. Healing begins when love is no longer something you survive, but something that supports your becoming. And in that new definition, you find not only peace, but yourself.